Minister's deal.
4 days to go and 24 or so ministers were dispatched to sell Theresa May's Brexit deal around the kingdom. Much of the campaign involves bringing business to the cause.
And what's really coming through in constituencies like this in Peterborough is the strong view of business that they want the certainty of the deal, they don't want the uncertainty of no deal or no Brexit, and that's why we're making the case to colleagues across Parliament.
Meanwhile, the Health Secretary Matt Hancock has warned pharmaceutical firms that if there's no deal, then the EU may well impose controls on people and goods entering the EU from the UK. And the biggest impact would be across the English Channel at Dover and Folkestone. The revised cross-government planning assumptions show that there will be significantly reduced access across the short straits, Hancock wrote, for up to 6 months. And that was also spelt out by the man who's in effect Theresa May's deputy.
Worst case scenario is that you would be looking to a traffic flow across the channel being reduced from its current levels to between 13 and perhaps 25% of current levels. Now that's something that we don't want. It is a worst case assumption, but so much depends on what the French decide to do in those circumstances, which clearly we don't control. If they follow European law, as they're obliged to do, there are lots of checks and controls that have to be imposed.
The industry says it's the biggest logistical challenge they've faced in decades.
And we have been stockpiling, we've been stockpiling and we've been stockpiling. But the message is that stockpiling will not be enough when you have up to 6 months of delays at borders. So we've been working with the government to open up other supply routes. So now we need to know the details of which other ports can be opened up for lorries and for containers. And we'll be trying to arrange an air bridge so that we can fly medicines in if required.
What the industry really wants is a transition period. But you're only going to get a transition period if you vote for the deal, aren't you?
Well, this is the only deal that's on the table. So we are saying you need a transition period, and that's what we hope that MPs will think about when they come to vote.
But there's a growing debate right now in both main parties between possible alternatives. This backbencher says not Norway.
It's not a quick fix, it's not a solution, and there is no time.
But are there the votes in Parliament, though, for what you want, which is another referendum?
I think Parliament is going to shift through the gears very, very quickly on people's vote. I think it's the only way out. Parliament has taken back control. I think what Parliament needs to do next week is hand power back to the people.
Despite the campaigning and cajoling by ministers and whips, Mrs May still looks set for a big defeat, and there are signs tonight that some members of the government payroll vote may quit on Tuesday. Mike Wood, parliamentary aide to the Trade Secretary Liam Fox, tells me he met the Prime Minister this week to demand substantial changes to the backstop arrangement. Without them, he says, he won't be able to support the government and therefore will have to resign. Michael Crick, Channel 4 News, Westminster.
Well, our North of England correspondent Claire Fallon spent the day in Penrith, where local MP and Prisons Minister Rory Stewart has been out trying to sell the deal to his constituents.
It's standing room only for Rory Stewart and the Sell the Brexit Deal show. Technical hitch solved, and we're off.
Sometimes I just have to switch it on. This is either a festival of democracy or the stupidest decision I've ever made in my political career. I'm not really sure which of these two things it is. How many people in this room at the moment are actually in favour of the Prime Minister's deal? Okay, so 15% of the room, 85% against, is to return.
The Prisons Minister is one of the most vocal supporters of Theresa May's deal. His belief that if explained properly, the moderate majority would back the deal too. But when it's his turn to answer questions, the crowd gets tougher still.
Now, I don't give you my permission to make a deal that future generations, future politicians cannot change. You do not have the right to do that.
How can we go and leave Europe when we don't know what's going to happen to our economy?
with a Tory MP who voted Remain and a constituency that voted narrowly to leave. 2.5 years on, and after an hour in a hall battling for minds, if not hearts, it seems little has changed.
Did he change your mind, sir?
No.
Not at all?
Not at all, no.
Did he change your mind?
No.
No, nor did I. We need a people's vote. Thank you.
Just because they didn't like the decision, it doesn't mean they say they can go back and have another go.
I do share his concern about a divided society, and we've got to somehow find a way that works for everyone, and that's difficult.
Well, I caught up with Rory Stewart after that meeting, and I began by asking him whether he's flogging a dead horse.
No, I actually, I love doing these public meetings. I mean, firstly, being a politician is all about discussing big issues. But the most important thing in a public meeting at the moment on Brexit is that about half the room is disagreeing violently with the other half of the room. So as the Member of Parliament standing at one end of the room, you're helping people to understand the core of this problem, which is that we have a very polarised, divisive debate. And of course, I'm trying to argue for the middle ground. I'm trying to argue that the Prime Minister's deal is a way of healing these divisions.
I know that was the plan, that you would be able to find an idea around which people could unite. But the truth is that you have united them against you.
Well, it can certainly feel like that sometimes, definitely certainly feel like that sometimes. It's difficult to know, actually, in a room and with humans and with people, what's going on under the surface. So what I felt as we went through the meeting, and what I felt in many of these meetings, I was being shouted at by 650 people in London 2 nights ago. I was up in Scotland doing this again, is that opinions may begin to shift under the surface more slowly. So even though people are very reluctant to leave a hard Brexit position or a second referendum position, they may be beginning to feel their way towards some of the compromises that may be necessary to keep things together.
There are some who think that this whole process of valiantly losing is part of some plan, that you need to be seen to lose badly in order to go back to the European Union and say you need to give us some more on the backstop. I mean, are you just being a good soldier?
I would definitely like to win this. I think that it's really important to win this, because if we don't win this, the transition period is going to be in danger of disappearing. I'm not sure people have fully taken on board that if we don't get the withdrawal agreement done by March, there is no transition. There's no period through to the end of 2020. There's no time in which to negotiate trade deals to sort ourselves out. Even worse than that, if Parliament can't get a majority for any deal and we go into a no deal, then the world will begin to question whether Parliament can get a majority for anything in the future. In other words, uncertainty becomes doubled. So I'm really hoping we can win.
It's being reported that some members of the Cabinet are advising the Prime Minister to delay, to put off this vote on Tuesday, because it's looking certain she will lose. If it is still looking the way it is now on Monday night, what would you advise her?
I don't know. I think it's a very, very difficult question, this. Because obviously I believe very strongly that this is the right deal, that the logic is behind this deal, and that if the public and members of Parliament are given more time to really understand what happened in the negotiations with Europe, how much we've gained, and how dangerous, risky and unpredictable these other so-called options are, they're going to begin to get behind that deal. But how you get there, I'm not really sure, because from my point of view, I know that very few people in Parliament want a second referendum. Very few people want a hard Brexit. So we should be talking somewhere in the area of this deal. But as you say, we don't seem to be. And getting there is going to take a lot of persuasion.
Rory Stewart. Now, there are also cracks on the Remain side of the debate, with the People's Vote campaign criticising both those arguing for a Norway-style soft Brexit and the Liberal Democrats for putting down an amendment for Tuesday's vote calling for another referendum. Too soon, say the People's Vote campaigners. Joining me now is the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Vince Cable. Now, this is sort of about political strategy, Sir Vince, and people are saying if you have an amendment on a vote for a People's Vote on Tuesday, you'll kill it off. Have you got it wrong?
No, not at all. There is a very minor issue about parliamentary procedure and tactics. I've had very amicable conversations today with people in other parties who are working with us. We're going to work together, and we just want to make sure that Parliament does properly debate this option when the opportunity arises. There's a bit of a storm in a teacup here.
Well, but you're preempting Labour MPs' process, aren't you? You know very well that Labour's position is wait for a defeat, then go for a general election, then consider a second referendum. By forcing them to vote on it before the defeat, you risk none of them coming to your aid.
No, we're not proposing to do that. We will cooperate very closely with our allies in other parties. There are some Conservatives, some Labour. We just want to make sure that the option of a people's vote it's becoming increasingly likely and increasingly well supported, and that Parliament does have this opportunity. But you know, there is no difficulty here at all.
When you say it's becoming more supported,
want to make...
by who?
Well, the problem is the Liberal Democrats treat this as an absolutely central issue. We believe in it. Whenever this is being debated in Parliament, we've always wanted to have it up front. The Labour Party are coming to this, or many of them, as a last resort. The Conservatives are coming to it from another standpoint. But there is a growing mood that we have to go back to the public and we have to put to them the choice. Do you want the Theresa May deal or do you want to stay in the European Union? That's the fundamental question, and that is what I'm sure Parliament will be confronting next week.
But there is this other option of being more like Norway, of being in the single market, but then also adding on to that, being in a customs union, so that you solve the Northern Ireland problem. That would respect formally the referendum result, because it is technically Brexit, but it's very soft Brexit.
Yes.
Isn't that your best bet? I mean, you're risking losing everything and going into a no-deal Brexit situation.
Well, there is some merit in the idea, but there is also a lot of problems with it. Of course, it makes sure that we are fully aligned with all the rules of the European Union, but we have no vote over it. Britain continues to make a large financial contribution. There is no... Sorry, a car passing. Yes. There is no control over migration. There are serious problems. If this had been floated as a serious idea 2 years ago and had a genuine cross-party debate, we may now be in a position to take it forward. But it is really too late. It's not practical.
But it's not too late,
I'm being unreasonable. I think there's some merit in. I think it probably is, but certainly we will look at this. But the first preference must be to go back to the public on the deal that is already there and that Theresa May has negotiated.
What makes you think a second referendum would lead to the end of Brexit?
Well, it's more likely to lead to the end of this poisonous argument than any other. Of course, we've got to make the case. We've got to win it. I think there's a good chance, but, there is a risk that we do lose it. If that happens, I've been very clear, we accept the result, we move on, we try to make Brexit work. I think if it's approached in that spirit, then a lot of the worries at the moment about gross dissatisfaction and anger, I think they would be dissipated.